Hello, good afternoon and welcome to the Co-operative Executive Meeting of the 16th of February. Good to see everyone here this afternoon. I'm Councillor Julie Growcutt. I will be chairing the meeting this afternoon as Councillor Fox is away on holiday. The meeting today is open to the public, although there is a reduced room capacity to ensure we have a COVID-secure environment and social distancing is properly observed. The meeting will be webcast live and the recording will also be available for people to view later through the Council's website. As a result of the reduced room capacity, we have one member of the public who is asking questions and report authors who are presenting items today that are observing the meeting on a screen in the reception room. This may mean that there will be a short pause in between these items to allow them to make their way into the room. I therefore ask for your patience as we allow this process to be managed safely. Please can I request that all mobile telephones and other such equipment switch to silent mode so as not to disturb the conduct of the meeting. There is no fire alarm test planned for today, and if there is an emergency evacuation, then please follow the instruction of the Town Hall staff, and the assembly point is Tudor Square, Councillor Fox's favourite spot in town. Before we start, can I ask each cooperative executive member to introduce themselves, please? And we'll start with Councillor Teal.
Thank you, Chair. My name's Alison Teal, and I'm the Co-op Exec Member for Sustainable Neighbourhoods, Wellbeing, Parks and Leisure.
Councillor Douglas Johnson, Executive Member for Climate Change, Environment and Transport.
Paul Turpin, Executive Member for Inclusive Economy, Jobs and Skills.
Thank you, Paul.
Good afternoon. Councillor Kate MacDonald, Executive Member for Finance and Resources.
I'm Councillor Jordan Hammond. I'm Executive Member for Health and Social Care.
Councillor Jane Dunn, Executive Member, Education, Children and Families.
Good afternoon, Councillor Paul Wood, Co-operative Executive Member for Housing, Roads and Waste Management.
Hi, I'm Councillor Iqbal, Executive Member for City Futures, Development, Culture and Regeneration.
Thank you, everyone. I'll also ask our officers to introduce themselves, starting at the 10.
Thank you. Gillian Duckworth, Director of Legal and Governance.
Eugene Walker, Executive Director of Resources.
Abby Brownsword, Principal Committee Secretary.
Alexis Chappell, Director of Adult Health and Social Care, and today covering for Joanne McAleith, Executive Director for People Services.
Thank you, everyone. Item 2 is apologies for absence. What apologies do we have noted, please, Abby?
Thank you, Chair. We've got apologies from Councillor Terry Fox, Kate Josephs and John McAleith and Mick Crofts.
Thank you. Item 3 is the exclusion of the press and public. At item 15 on the agenda, there is an appendix which is not available to the public or press because it contains exempt information. If members wish to discuss the information in the appendix, I will ask members of the public and press to kindly leave for that part of the meeting and we will hold the webcast. Is that okay with everyone, please? Thank you. Item 4 is declarations of interest. Can I ask members if you have any interest to declare for any items of business on the agenda, and if so, can you refer to the item of business and state whether this is a pecuniary or personal interest when making your declaration, please? Thank you. Moving on to item 5, which is the minutes of the meeting, which can be found at page 11 in the agenda pack. Are members happy to approve as a correct record the minutes of the meeting of the Corporate Executive held on the 19th of January, please? Everyone okay with them? Anyone not? Thank you. Item 6 is public questions and petitions. There are a number of petitions and questions from 3 members of the public, and we'll just await the arrival of our first member of the public for the questions. Thank you. Hello, good afternoon, Christine. I understand you have our first question today. You're very welcome for the meeting, and if you would like to read it out, please. Thank you.
Hello, thank you. I'm Christine Rose, and I am representing the Women's Equality Party and Know the Line campaign. This year, we are mainly focusing on doing everything we can to end male violence against women and girls. I don't need to list the reasons why this is so important, but they range from the number of women killed by men, the low levels of prosecution in rape cases, the appalling misogynistic behaviour recently uncovered in the Met Police, to everyday examples of street sexual harassment. We are angry that it is always women who are told to change their behaviour, and mostly women who campaign against violence against women and girls. It is men who carry out the violence and harassment, and it is men who need to change the behaviour. Therefore, we are supporting the White Ribbon Campaign, which is the leading charity working to end male violence against women. They encourage everyone, especially men and boys, to make the White Ribbon promise to never commit, excuse, or remain silent about male violence against women and girls. We are asking that Sheffield City Council commit to gaining White Ribbon status. This would mean, amongst other things, appointing male ambassadors, both councillors and senior officers, to work on this. We need a timetable for gaining accreditation and the development of a 3-year White Ribbon Action Plan to implement this. This has the potential to reach a wide range of people and improve the lives of women and girls in Sheffield significantly. Everyone should have the right to not live in fear and to feel safe in wherever they are in our city. So, my question is, will you commit to bring a joint motion to full council within 6 months, setting out your intention to achieve White Ribbon accreditation by April 2023? Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. I understand Councillor Teal is going to provide a response.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Christine, for bringing this. You know that personally this is a campaign that's very dear to my heart, and I think it's really important. Unfortunately, I had COVID at the time that this was last discussed in full council, which was tremendously upsetting for me that I wasn't able to represent a point of view that I share with you. So currently, I believe the White Ribbon status, we are required to agree that we're going to either phase out or not have approval of any sexual entertainment venues. And again, that's something that you and I have been campaigning on for some time as well. In order to do that, that has to go through the licensing committee. And I know I've heard from Claire Bauer, who is the legal officer who helps the licensing committee. She's currently working on a draft, which is the sex establishment policy, and she's hoping to present that to the licensing committee in April 2022 this year. I'm hoping that that will make some strong progress towards us ultimately getting a motion that will approve our joining for the White Ribbon status. I think you said 2023? Yeah, So hopefully that will happen. Sadly, I won't be here to see that through, but I very much hope that there will be some champions for that in my absence. I think there will be. And just also to say that, yeah, we can't keep ignoring that it actually breaches our public sector equality duty because of the very, very different employment circumstances of male employees in sexual entertainment venues versus female, the dancers, the women who are on contracts working there, very, very different employment circumstances, which my colleague Douglas Johnson raised. And I thought it was a really important point and something that we really need to emphasise now to the licensing committee. So, yeah, fully supportive and do everything I can to make this happen, and thank you for raising it again.
Thank you, Councillor Teal. Thank you, Christine. Mr Johnson, good afternoon. Thank you for attending today. I understand you've got a number of questions. Do you want to read them all out in one go or one at a time? I'll leave that to you.
Oh, thank you. It's not usually a privilege I'm allowed. Good afternoon, everybody. Members, officers, thank you for allowing me here today. Firstly, I must give something of an apology myself for seeking one from you. I have 8 questions today. However, please indulge me because it's been a while since I was here for a number of reasons, and most are very, very short indeed. But firstly, could I ask the acting leader, deputy leader, please, for an apology for the mishandling of my public questions at this month's full council?
I'm very happy to give you that apology. Unfortunately, I was unwell, so I wasn't at full council myself. I understand that there were a number of issues in terms of the questions came here in the first instance to the Co-op exec, got rolled over to full council, and then there was an administrative mix-up in terms of where they went. And so the people who needed to know that they should have been in place on time as they were for the full council meeting didn't get that information, which was where the mix-up came. And I do understand that you've also received an email apology from our administrative services.
Thank you. May I call you Julie? Yeah, thank you for that. I am pleased to hear it, and it's gone on record. Okay, first question is under sort of the first few questions under kind of heading the reputation of the council, something I'm very concerned about as a citizen. A number of matters have called into question the quality of political leadership of this council. 3 matters, though themselves separate, are connected in my view, highlighting a number of cultural shortcomings that characterise the organisation. Firstly, the Council Iqbal affair. After a year of investigation of serious allegations regarding this senior elected member, the leader is quoted as saying this: "The independent recommendations completely exonerate Councillor Iqbal, drawing a firm line under this matter." That's a matter of public record. Yet, the committee, which looked at this matter, said this: "The subcommittee was deeply concerned about the seeming acceptability of day-to-day behaviours of senior officers and members illustrated by the complaint. In the subcommittee's view, the subject member did not always model behaviours expected of a senior member of the council, and this type of behaviour should not have gone unchecked." I'm just pausing because I see that Councillor Iqbal is not remaining in the meeting. It's a matter of some regret. People may draw their own conclusions. So the two things taken together, the leader's exoneration and the quote from the examining committee, seem to be contradictory. So the question is this. Question 1. Does the leader understand, or deputy leader in this case, why the public might be sceptical about the legitimacy of the exoneration? Will she express on the record unreserved confidence in the integrity of the councillor? I thought Mazza might like to hear that. concerned whose role involves interacting with officers and commercial developers. Question 2. Will the leader reassure the public that the recommendations of the consideration subcommittee regarding member officer protocols, development training for senior officers and members to improve behaviours, including engaging the whips to encourage participation, are being vigorously pursued? And would the Deputy Leader please provide a progress report on that matter? Now, shall I ask some more? Because they're kind of linked, these. Yeah, you've got them in front of you. Okay, the next section is about my concerns regarding the appointment of Charlie Aidan for a period of time as an interim chief exec. SCC 3 times refused to be open about the costs of employing Charlie Aidan after the unexpected early retirement of Mr. Mothersole. The first time in response to a PQ of mine, then twice in connection with an FOIR. Eventually, the truth was forced from a less than transparent council that eye-watering amounts were paid to create an unnecessary, in my view, short-term post. So question 3 relates to that. Does the Labour group now regret the enormous expenditure at a time of severe pressure on council resources? Could the monies have been better deployed for the citizens' benefit? And thirdly, in this group, this is concerning assault allegations regarding a senior councillor. At the December full council at the Octagon building, it has been reported, and video has appeared on this subject, that a senior Labour member behaved in an aggressive and unacceptable manner towards a member of the public, pulling down his mask against his wishes. Furthermore, a video is freely circulating that appears to show the leader himself adopting an aggressive manner and shouting at a person outside the hall. Question 4 relates to this. Does the leader, deputy leader, agree with me that this kind of behaviour does not tend to enhance the council's or the Labour Party's reputations? Does Councillor Fox, or Councillor Goka acting on his behalf perhaps, believe it is responsibility of the leader of a major council to model civil and courteous behaviour to set an appropriate example? And finally, in this section, question 5, will she express regret on behalf of her leader for those actions? Obviously, I was expecting this to come from Councillor Fox himself, and explain the nature and timing of the training that Councillor Dams has been asked to attend as part of his disciplinary process. Shall I pause there?
Okay, thank you for those questions. I think it's very important to say, and I am sorry that Councillor Iqbal has left, that I do have unreserved confidence in his integrity, and I know that this position is shared by the Leader of the Council as well. We've also acknowledged that the report findings noted areas within the organisation, both cultural and structural, that need improvement, and we are committed to working with officers and others to deliver on those. With regard to the second question, in relation to the consideration subcommittee and member officer protocols, we have a member development programme that has been put together. We are committed as an organisation to making sure that all councillors have training and the support that they need to properly and effectively serve the city. So that is something that we are doing. In relation to the question about the December full meeting, I think it's important to say that as councillors we abide to the best of our ability to the noble principles of public life, and that includes all members of the leadership team as well. It's abide by those principles, and again the reference you make to Councillor Dams, obviously I can't speak for Councillor Fox in regard to how he feels, but it's not appropriate for me to comment on matters relating to individual councillors, I don't think. The question in relation to the employment of Charlie Adden, I don't think that it's appropriate to respond in this forum, so we may get back to you in relation to that question. Does Councillor McDonald wants to say something? Thank you, Kate.
Thank you for your question. You refer to the Labour group in this. All aspects of the appointment of the interim chief executive were undertaken by the council, not one particular group. The council acted transparently throughout the appointment of an interim chief executive following the departure of John Mothersall. This included full council agreement to the proposed arrangement of the appointment of an interim chief executive with knowledge of the potential costs, the procurement process to identify potential candidates, the appointment decision being made by a senior officer appointment committee, that is a cross-party senior officer appointments committee, and responding to 6 separate FOI requests and 2 ICO investigations. The only information withheld was that which was clearly personal data and the contractual costs of the arrangement, which was deemed to be commercially sensitive. At the same time, invoices covering the costs of the interim chief executive, of employing the interim chief executive, were published monthly as part of our transparency reporting. The Information Commissioner partly upheld an appeal and requested that the council release the contractual costs for the supply of the interim chief executive, and we have complied with this. So let me be absolutely clear again, let me repeat it. This matter was dealt with throughout by the council, not a single political group. Thank you for your question.
Thank you. By the way, I didn't refer to the Labour group in the context of Charlie Aiden's appointment. It was in another context regarding councillor behaviours. But anyway, thank you for that, Councillor MacDonald. You'll be pleased to hear, ladies and gentlemen, that my final few questions are very short. Okay. Question 6. The public are experiencing still lengthy delays in freedom of information requests, subject access requests, and the processing of formal complaints. One recent much delayed SAR was only provided after a threat of legal action, then delivered with excessive redaction. This situation persists despite assurances to the contrary since the current chief exec has been in post. Question 6. Does the leader understand that it is particularly important to address this as the independent inquiry into the street tree scandal gets underway, with Sir Mark beginning his deliberations? And the serious implications of continuing poor performance for the image of the council. Question 7 is about legal professional privilege, and it's simply a very short question asking for an update on progress. Please would the appropriate Co-op exec member provide an update on the independent investigation into the council's misuse of legal professional privilege. And finally, question 8. This is about public scrutiny, about the future of occasions like this and full council. Now that our esteemed Prime Minister has effectively signalled the end of COVID restrictions, has SCC decided whether indeed and when we will return to full council in the chamber, in this room, and with public questions notifiable on the day, as we used to enjoy? Thank you.
Thank you. The first of his second set of questions, Mr Johnson, about freedom of information. We have a professional team of officers who work diligently to deal with the volume of requests that we receive as a council, and we are continuously improving our methods of delivery to clear backlog created when staff were redeployed during the response to the pandemic. Redaction is an appropriate part of disclosure and is applied in accordance with the regulations. The inquiry will determine the documentation it requires as it progresses, and we are committed to supporting that progress in relation to the street trees. In relation to legal professional privilege, the process that we've been through to investigate this matter has involved external lawyers to give us an independent view. That and the amount of evidence that has been collated during the pandemic has meant that the matter has taken longer to conclude than we would have wished. However, matters should now be concluded shortly. The complainant and those affected by the process are being kept informed, and it would be wrong to give further details until they have been fully informed of the situation. And then finally, the last question, we are planning to return to for the extraordinary meeting scheduled for the 23rd of March to the Council Chamber and will continue to require public questions to be submitted in advance to allow us to monitor the number of attendees to keep people as safe as possible when they're within the premises. Thank you, Mr Johnson.
Thank you, Lady.
Thank you. Okay, members, I've just been informed that Mr Pegg hasn't attended, so hopefully Councillor Johnson, you'll be able to send him a written response to that question as he isn't here. And in relation to the public questions from Ruth Hubbard, she has asked that they be read out, but we will be sending a written response to Ruth in any event to those questions. Thank you, Abby.
This is the questions from Ruth Hubbard. Number 1, can you confirm, in line with the expectations of citizens, that the situation with our council's chief executive is being treated as a disciplinary matter? I would appreciate a very clear yes or no answer on this, as I know many others would. Question 2, public statements from the council have emphasised the need to follow procedures. Given this is so clearly a disciplinary matter with multiple elements and implications, can you explain why the procedures outlined in the Senior Officer Employment Regulations do not appear to be being followed? This might well be an extraordinary situation, but what is the laid down procedure being followed, or are you making it up as you go along? Number 3, can you clarify who is advising members on this, and is this advice internal or external? Number 4, who is the investigator, and how long do you expect an investigation to take place? Is the completion of Sheffield City Council's investigation partly dependent upon the outcome of the Metropolitan Police investigation? And if so, why? Does the Council believe there is only a problem if a penalty fine notice is or is not issued? And finally, can the Cabinet affirm this Council's commitment in principle and practice to the Nolan Principles, or does it intend to pursue the utterly disgraceful example of number 10 in seeing what can be got away with, ignored or lied about?
Thank you for reading those out, Abby, and as I say, we will be sending a written response along. That takes us on to item 7, which is items for calling for scrutiny. Can we please note that there are none? And then item 8 is the retirement of staff, which can be found at page 33 in our report. This report provides details of 10 members of staff who have recently retired from the council with over 20-year service. So I think it is a good opportunity to thank Debbie Marshall, Deborah Walker, Carol Archer, Beverly Birch and Jan Warwick for their outstanding and lengthy service to the council, and wish them all the best for their future, whatever that entails. Can we all agree that, please, members? Thank you. Item 9 is the Sheffield Local Plan, Spatial Options. This starts at page 37 in the agenda, and we have two officers who we need to bring into the room to address us in relation to this item, please. That rings a bit blurry.
Sorry?
Michael Simon, good afternoon. You're here to talk to us about the Sheffield local plan spatial options. If you could introduce yourselves, please, and then give us the report. Thank you.
Chair, I'm Michael Johnson, Head of Planning.
I'm Simon Vincent, I'm the Local Plan Service Manager.
Chair, I'll hand over to Simon, but the purpose of us being here today is to hopefully conclude the process that we've been through over the last sort of 3-4 months with members around the local plan spatial options. So I'll hand over to Simon, who's going to read a short statement that just summarises where we are at the moment. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. The Cooperative Executive considered a version of this report on the 19th of January. The Executive discussed the advice provided by the Climate Change, Economy and Development Transitional Committee and referred the report to full Council to obtain the views of the Council. The report has now come back to the Executive for a final decision on which spatial option to take forward in the local plan. Full Council considered the spatial options on the 2nd of February, and the options have also been extensively discussed at a series of Transitional Committee workshops held between November and January. The Transitional Committee also had a lengthy discussion about the pros and cons of the 5 spatial options at its meeting on the 13th of January. The view of both the Transitional Committee and full Council is that option 3 should be taken forward in the local plan. Option 3 means focusing almost all future development in the existing urban areas, mostly on brownfield sites. It would, however, allow some development to take place on previously undeveloped land in the urban areas and allow some development on sustainably located brownfield sites in the Greenbelt, on the basis that exceptional circumstances are likely to exist to justify developing those sites. It also means, though, that land for development would not be allocated on greenfield sites in the Greenbelt. This would be on the grounds that exceptional circumstances don't currently exist to justify altering the Greenbelt boundary. It's probably worth saying that there was quite a lot of discussion at full Council and at the Transitional Committee around option 4. Option 4 would allow greenfield sites in the Greenbelt to be released where there are site-specific exceptional circumstances to justify a change to the boundary. For example, to support economic development or to support the provision of major new transport infrastructure. Option 4 was supported by the Green Party members who are concerned about the potential loss of urban green space, which can be more environmentally valuable than greenfield sites in the Greenbelt, and I'm sure members today may wish to say more about their concerns. Some members were, however, concerned that allowing some greenfield development in the Greenbelt would open the door to other sites also being put forward, and this would undermine brownfield regeneration. As officers, we've made clear at the meetings that we would favour option 4 on the basis that this offers more flexibility and carries less risk of the plan being found unsound at examination. Nevertheless, we feel a case can also be made to support option 3. Just finally, in terms of next steps, following the decision of the Cooperative Executive today, we will work up a plan that incorporates the preferred overall spatial approach. All sites that have been put forward for consideration and which fit the preferred spatial approach will need to go through a site selection process that considers their suitability, availability and achievability. And we will be working with a local plan member steering group drawn from the Transitional Committee in working up the draft plan. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions, please? Councillor Turpin?
Thank you, Chair. Hello again, Michael Simon. Can I just clarify that the local plan will be, it's possible to amend it every 5 years? Amend, modify, whatever you choose. Is that the case?
Yes, the legislation or the National Planning Policy Framework expects local plans to be updated at least every 5 years. They can be updated sooner than that if circumstances change significantly and the council thought it was necessary to do a review more quickly. Yeah.
Thanks. I don't have any more questions, but I do have some comments, Chair. Shall I go ahead or do you... Thanks. Yeah, I mean, as pointed out, we did prefer the option 4 route because also, you know, not only is it the officer's recommendation, but we believed it was the way to best protect the green spaces of higher ecological and social value. We also thought that it could provide social housing in rural areas, which could increase services, make public transport more viable, mean that young people who've grown up in those areas could have a chance of staying in them without having to leave. But you know, option 3 is okay, and it's not as good as option 4. I think there was a certain fear amongst politicians that developing the Greenbelt would be a big turn off for voters. But as Simon pointed out, option 3 does also have development on the Greenbelt, and so we don't think it's that big a step for what we would get in return. That is protecting our urban green spaces where people live. So yeah, we are willing to support option 3, but we believe that we'll have to revisit this at some point within the next 5 years to look at bringing in some of those Greenbelt sites of lower value in order to protect our higher value urban sites. That's all. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Linda Hammond.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to start by, and it's been said many times, but it's said many times that this report and Petitions represent a huge amount of work by many officers in the planning service, but actually more widely in the council, and to get to this stage, and I know politically and otherwise it's not always easy, represents, a really big moment for the council, and I think it's a really great stage to go on. I just want to say that I am, although it's difficult, and I completely understand the range of arguments for the different options, I think that as a councillor that represents a ward that is, largely surrounded by the Greenbelt, I think that, I'm really confident that we are endorsing the right approach here, and one that, will be supported and endorsed, I'm sure, in time by my residents and so many across the city. So, I'm really pleased on the hard work you got to get us there. So, thank you, Chair.
Any more? Councillor Johnson.
Just a brief one, just to reflect on the fact that we are seeing progress now that hasn't been seen for the last 5 years, really. So I think that's the benefit we've seen of cross-party working. We discussed the respect to be given to the views of full council as a whole. But just, I was hoping that Councillor Tim was going to mention option 3.5, just because it's a really important caveat to everything that I think we've all discussed, in saying that the next step, I guess, is to develop those policies that really underpin the quality of build, wherever it is, the quality of development. And we need to see, really good, strong planning policies, because that's important to protect whatever site is built on. So looking forward to that as the next step. But I think I'm glad that we're getting over this really significant hurdle that's obviously been a barrier for several years now. So that's progress. Thanks.
And I thought it was because we got a new head of planning that we'd started to make magnificent progress. So I was going to lay it squarely at the feet of you two, because you have done. And I know from my short time last year working in the planning portfolio, I do know the vast amount of work that has gone into this, the consultations, the difficult decisions. It is a good piece of work. This is a sensible recommendation. I think we do need to keep our eye on the ball in terms of flexibility as and when we need it. I think that will be important, but we just have the one recommendation on page 38, members. Are we all happy to approve that, please? Anyone not? Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you both. Good to see you all, and keep up the good work. I'm sure there's, well, I know there's lots more to come with this, but thank you to you and the team as well. And item 10, on a row, Michael, planning service income activities.
Chair, Lucy Bond's just going to come and
Is
join
Lucy
us.
coming in as well?
Yeah, thank you.
We'll hang on, and then Lucy can introduce herself. Just the members, it starts at page 98 in your pack. 79 even, I'm going, yeah. Sorry about that. Good afternoon, Lucy. You're here with Michael to talk about item number 10 on the agenda, the planning service income activities. If you could introduce yourself, please, and then give the report. Thank you.
Hi, I think Michael's going to give the report, but I'm Lucy Bond and I'm the Acting Service Manager in Development Management.
Thanks, Lucy. Chair, so we're here today with a report that's focused on income activity and planning. There's two aspects to it. The first is generally about fee increases and dealing with some fees that we've not increased for quite some time, and making sure that as part of this piece of work we adjust fees to look and to achieve cost recovery as much as is practical and as sensible. There are three fees that we're here to talk about today. The first one is the pre-application fee for pre-application advice in development management, and that's advice that's given on a discretionary basis to people who are proposing development within the city and wish to come and get some advice from officers in advance of submitting a formal application. The other two fees don't relate directly to the planning service, but indirectly, because they're fees that are charged within the administrative hub that does work for planning as well as other sort of particularly regulatory services. So the two fees there are to introduce an administration charge for the receipt of applications that aren't lodged through the national system that we know as the planning portal, and to update fees relating to expedited planning searches. So those both are activities related to the administrative hub. All the fee increase proposals in front of members today have been benchmarked with help from various colleagues, including colleagues from finance, and they've got an evidence base that sit behind them in terms of recording officer time. The one thing just to note in relation to the pre-application fee increase, we're not proposing to increase that to full cost recovery. That increases to around about 55% full cost recovery. Part of that and part of this whole process, and it's a challenging one to get right, and we need to say that from the outset really, is there's a real benefit to the city and there's a real benefit to the service of people using the pre-application service, and a price point that puts people off that will actually ultimately be result in a situation where less applications come in for pre-application, and therefore they're not at a stage when the application is submitted to move through the system as quickly as possible. So for us it's about pitching it in a right place that doesn't dissuade people from moving away from using that pre-application service, but does look at getting more cost back in terms of the service, so it can be recycled essentially. As part of the paper, we're suggesting that we keep an eye on that for the next 12 months and see whether there's a dip in people using the service or not, and then as part of that review see whether actually it's appropriate at that point to increase fees further. The second part of the paper really relates to activities that planning undertakes to support and promote the production of neighbourhood plans. And essentially it seeks to establish a process to support the development of neighbourhood plans via the 1.5% of collected CIL already set aside for this function. So that's the introduction, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Turpin, then Councillor Johnson.
Thank you. Michael, I was just looking at the figures here. For the small scale major, you've got the average as, I've lost my page, I think it was 3,600. And I've just worked out the average and it's 7,282. And that's using the low end of the one that has a range, 200 to, where am I? 600 to 2,400. I use the lower end of that range, but I'm still getting double what you're calling the average across the core cities. And because generally, you know, we're not charging much for the bigger developments. So on that large scale development, if you want to increase the fees so that there's something like the average, 3,500 is still less than half of the average across the other cities.
Chair, I think part of that plays into the second element of this, which is we've looked at an evidence base and we looked at average, but we've also looked at what we charge at the moment and actually what's reasonable to increase these different application types incrementally. So it's not to say that we wouldn't look at that again in 12 months and say, well, there's not been a drop off in terms of that type of application come in and it's appropriate to increase it further. But like I said, it's a really challenging one, this, because there's no right or wrong. It's a judgment about the right place to pitch it. And we feel that the increase that's being proposed in small scale majors at the moment for Sheffield, bearing in mind what we charge, is the right approach to take and monitor and see whether there's a drop off. And at that point, we would look at it again and see whether actually we can increase. So the average is coupled with the data that we collect, and but also married into that sort of process is where we think we want to pitch it with the applicant and the business community at the moment to continue to persuade them to use the service. But this is all about review as well, Chair, so we'll gather our evidence around that over the next 12 months and see if it's right to increase it again.
I do appreciate that, and you know, you don't want to triple the fees overnight or whatever just to pull a number out of the air. But what, I mean, that number is wrong, isn't it? 3,600 is not the average. The average is, like I said, double that.
Is it essential that we have an exact number in this, or are we actually happy with the principle as Michael's explained it in terms of what they're doing, and if we need to jiggle the figures they can go away and redo the sums? I'm just asking.
But I guess so. I mean, it's just that, I believe probably the same as you do, Julie, that the big developers ought to be paying the right amount of money. And so I'm just questioning that 3,500 compared to 3,600 is a pretty fair approximation of what they're saying is the average. But what I'm saying is that isn't the average. The average is twice that. So we're still actually charging half of what the average across the core cities is, which, you know, is not right, in my opinion.
Can I just answer? I think that the issue is that on large scale majors with other authorities, there's a huge kind of disparity with one lot charging from £600 up to £18,000. But what we're saying is actually some of our large scale majors will fall into the strategic developments category, and that will be price on application. So for example, recent examples would be things like IKEA, Meadowhall, for example, and we actually calculate broadly how much the officer time will be in total, and so the fees for those would actually be substantially higher than the large-scale majors. So what we're talking about here is your average large-scale major, whereas the really big stuff will be price on application, so it will be charged at a fair rate. But it is difficult to pitch it because the core cities are so variable on what they charge, and actually Manchester don't seem to charge anything. So it's a difficult balancing act, and as Michael said, I think we need to review things. One of the problems we have is that if we don't pitch it right, people simply won't use the service, and when you submit a planning application, we have a duty under the National Planning Policy Framework to work with applicants regardless of whether they've submitted pre-application. And also there's a clause that allows, if we refused a proposal, for example, they can come back with a free application, which again is more time. So it's about getting that balance right, in our opinion, and that's what we're trying to do here, but obviously to build in a review as well.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, as you realise, we were having a bit of discussion trying to make some sense out of these figures. Maybe we could do a look into the methodology, but nothing to hold us up today. So first of all, I was just going to say, I mean, yeah, we do support these, each of the aspects of the things in this report. It's a good thing. It's about time. So pleased to see those coming forward. I suppose what flags up to us is about the inequality. So we're just looking at for the individual householder doing things that might be quite minor, we've got a fee that's above average when possibly they're the people most in need of actual practical support. And for the large property developers, then the fees, as Councillor Tubbins pointed out, seem to be lower than the average of other core cities. So, but you've said that you'll be looking at those over the next 12 months and seeing how they work. Appreciate what you say there. But just what you've explained is that even with these fees, it'll only go to 55% of cost recovery. So we just need to recognise that even though this is a big step forward over what the council's been doing over the last few years, we are still subsidising, in particular, large developers who are profit-making organisations at a time when we've got a massive budget crisis on. And these fees increases are welcome, but I know that it only raises, an extra £70,000, and no disputing the professional views on the caveats about the impact of increasing the fees too quickly, but you think surely the construction industry and the property development industry in Sheffield can manage an extra £70,000 without too much quibbles, given the amount of money in that sector. So, yeah, just some comments there, but thanks for bringing it anyway. Pleased to see this.
Thank you. Chair, I mean, it's just to reiterate, there is a genuine commitment from us to look at this again in 12 months and look at that drop-off, but we, as yourselves as members, and I'm sure as the council as an organisation, are keen to get as close to cost recovery as possible, and this is a big first step, but it is only a first step for us.
Thank you. Councillor MacDonald and then Councillor Wood.
Thank you for this. Thank you for the paper. I see the Appendix 3 as just illustrative, to be honest, and as part of context for the decision. I'm quite happy to take the recommendation from officers because it's obviously a combination of factors that you want to take into account. And I'm not a cheerleader for the major developers, but I do know that, in fact, that you're going to put those fees up by nearly 50%, which is quite significant, and obviously you want to get that balance right. So I support the recommendations, and I know very little about this. I'm always saying that I'm not a spatial expert at all, but I think you've given us the rationale for doing it, and I'm happy to accept that advice. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wood. Paul, can you put your microphone on, please?
Again. Item 2.4, with the neighbourhood plans being able to draw down 25% of CIL as opposed to 15% currently, should all the areas produce acceptable neighbourhood plans, how will that affect the development of the large projects currently being funded by CIL, and how will that 10% be made back up?
Chair, my understanding is that there's a paper going to be coming to this meeting, potentially in March, that tackles the 25% issue in areas with neighbourhood plans. The reality in terms of the implications of an additional 10% going to those areas from the strategic pot is fairly insignificant relevant to the money in the pot, because of the nature of the areas that have the neighbourhood plans. There's no significant development opportunities. There are some opportunities, but there's no significant development opportunities or a significant amount of development opportunities in those areas that will see the strategic pot have any significant impact in terms of money bleeding out of it. I won't talk too much around the principles of the 25% going to those areas, because that's for colleagues in neighbourhoods to talk about when they bring a paper in front of you. But there wouldn't be a significant impact on the strategic pot itself. And obviously, I mean, it wouldn't be right not to sort of mention the time and the dedication it takes to get a neighbourhood plan in place, and actually having that sort of carrot, for want of a better phrase, in relation to the reward of a neighbourhood plan being developed and being adopted is right, because of the amount of time and effort that it takes to do that. And hopefully, as part of this proposal, we'll see more neighbourhood plans coming forward in different parts of the city as well.
Thank you. Any more comments, Councillor Johnson?
Sorry, just a question. When's it anticipated that the neighbourhood plans officer will be in post?
The proposal, Chair, is to be recruited. It's complicated, for want of a better phrase, but that element of the proposal and the part of the pre-application proposal is to build really the approvals around the planning MER to make sure that we can staff to that level. So it's slightly complicated in terms of where the deck chairs are and where the deck chairs move.
Yeah.
Councillor Teal.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just curious, Michael, it's quite a turnaround, potentially, the way that we're viewing the neighbourhood plans now, that there's an expectation that more neighbourhoods are going to do it. Just wondering, from your point of view, like what's led to the decision to employ someone? What intelligence do you have about neighbourhood plans likely to be popping up around the city? And yeah, I'm really pleased about it, but I'm just curious to know what have you heard?
We've got 3 neighbourhood plans proposed at the moment: Kelham, Neepsend, Ecclesfield and Stocksbridge, in different parts of the sort of infancy around proposals. There's one potentially proposed in and around Bradfield as well. So we do have information that they will come forward. But part of this as well is about being proactive. So about going out. I mean, we should be under no illusions that, and I'm sure we're not, you know, the DORA and the best neighbourhood plans, the amount of officer time it takes to support those plans is significant as well. And if we get 1 or 2 neighbourhood plans that start to come forward, 1 FTE won't stretch that far. But it is right to have that dedicated resource, because the reality is that resource exists because it's a statutory function to support them. It's about us making sure that there's a proper plan for the money that's been agreed to set aside for the service to support that. So there's a more linear process, if you like, for us, rather than us trying to work out what officer would support one plan when someone sends us an email. So it's about us understanding how our service works and supports it, but it's also about, when the opportunity arises, us being more proactive to go out and engage with communities that wouldn't necessarily engage with this process, even to an extent where it might not bear fruit of a neighbourhood plan, but it brings the conversation to them, and it helps them come together and form different parts of their community. So,
Well done. Yeah, we have 5 recommendations on page 81 associated with this paper. Are we happy to approve them all, please? Yeah, excellent. Thank you both very much. Good to see you both. Thank you. Good afternoon, Rachel. Thank you for attending this afternoon. You're here to present on the retender of tenants' contents insurance scheme for council tenants. So off you go whenever you're ready. Thank you.
Yeah. My name's Rachel Dawson. I'm the Operations and Development Manager in the Income Management and Financial Inclusion team in Housing and Neighbourhood Service. And I'm here to request approval for the council to undertake a full tender to broker through an insurance provider for a contents insurance scheme for Sheffield City Council tenants. We currently have a scheme in place, and the scheme has been in place for 5 years with the roll-on due to COVID, but actually we've had the same incumbent for going on 20 years. We want to make sure that we have the best package available for our tenants. Obviously, lots of things may have changed in that time, and by going out to full market tender, we'll be able to see what else is on the market and be confident with the package that we've got available for our customers. The scheme that we currently have is through a broker, as I say, to an insurance provider, and we in the Income Management and Financial Inclusion team administer that scheme. We offer currently insurance from £4,000 up to £40,000. It is choice, so customers have the choice whether to take it. The issue nationally is that there is a very low take-up of contents insurance for low-income renters. And unfortunately, they are also the group that are less likely to have savings or to have some resilience when they get into some kind of crisis. We are working really hard to educate and promote the need for tenant contents insurance. We currently have 10.6% of our tenants on the scheme. For us, we would like to improve that quite dramatically, but actually nationally, we've not found any other authority that have a higher number. We are actually nationally one of the better schemes available. So we really want to make sure in terms of monetary value, because in times when our tenants don't have a lot of money, things are getting a lot tighter, that we have a scheme that's available to as many people as possible. But that also offers in terms of education and marketing and support and things like that. So the request is that we go out to full market tender for the scheme to start in April 2023.
Thank you, Rachel. I think it really is an important scheme for people, and anything that we can do to promote it so that we are sure that more of our tenants, are covered and do have insurance is really important. Does anyone have any questions, please? Any comments? Councillor Teal?
Thank you, Chair. I'd be interested to know about what you've done previously, or if you're thinking about ways to incentivise people to take it up. Is there anything to say about that? I imagine there might be. Thank you.
Yeah, so in the past we have offered 4 weeks free when you sign up for direct debit. Unfortunately, because of legalities changing around insurance and making sure we have a level playing field, we've got quite a lot of not us, but the insurer have quite a lot of restrictions on things that they can offer new tenants and existing tenants. So unfortunately, we have had to stop the 4 weeks free. Things that we are looking at though is things like prize draws for everybody who signs up or is already on the scheme. In terms of our customers, the things that incentivise is that there is no excess at all with the scheme. You can pay it alongside your rent, so you can budget for whatever your income is. So you can pay your rent weekly, fortnightly, monthly, whatever your income comes in, and we can support with that. And there are numerous ways to pay direct debit, but also over the phone, online. The other benefits to our customers is that alongside talking about tenant contents insurance, we can have the other conversations then about referrals to credit union for savings or referrals to the CAB for debt and money advice, and putting it all as part of a financial inclusion package, really, to make sure that our tenants are really resilient in that way. But the scheme itself, like I said, there's no excess. If you make a claim, your premiums don't go up. We offer insurance at £1,000 increments. So for a lot of our tenants, a lot of the reasons that we get why they don't take tenant contents insurance is that they don't think they need it, or they don't have enough to insure. And it's trying to educate people that even your clothes, your crockery, your cutlery, even if you've got a mattress, take your house upside down and shake it, and how much would that cost? And we've managed to negotiate recently, so the scheme used to start at a £9,000 cover. Now it starts at £4,000, and it's just 65 pence a week. So for our customers who may not be able to get tenant contents insurance on the open market because of credit or affordability, this is a much better option. Unless there's been some fraudulent in their history, everybody can access our tenant contents insurance. It is open to all.
Yeah, thank you. That sounds really excellent and well thought through. Yeah, I'm impressed. That's great. Thank you.
Councillor Dunn and then Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Rachel. It's more of a comment, Councillor Grocott. I was going to ask you to expand on the people without credit rating, because that is really, really important. And I know from my time when I was in the lead, and also the amount of casework that I get, that so many people are concerned about the contents insurance. So I think there's an awful lot all local councillors can do to actually spread that word even further. I know that's quite easy for me in Southie, because I have a rather large amount of social housing, so it's something that we mention regularly. And I think especially now people have been working at home more as well, including those in my ward. I think people are valuing their home a little bit more, so I think we can actually push this through. But I just want to say well done, Councillor Wood, and I think it's absolutely fabulous. And I think I'm really proud that Sheffield has championed this.
Yeah, I think the education and anything that we can do to get the word out there, like you say, it's if people have never had insurance before, they've never had car insurance or house insurance or travel insurance, the benefit of having no excess or your premiums not going up on a claim doesn't really mean very much. But a lot of our tenants who may, we find they don't have contents insurance, but they may have mobile phone insurance, and they may pay £13.50 a month to cover a mobile phone. Now, our contents insurance is accidental damage as standard. It covers the mobile phone and the tablet, and if the child puts the football through the TV or anything, and everything else under there. And I think it's just opening that conversation and helping people to understand that you're paying this money for this one item, but you can pay this money. And then if you do have a fire or a flood, you're not going to high-value lenders to borrow to pay your rent. You're not stopping paying your rent and risking your home. You're not going to illegal money lenders. You've got more of a backup on what you're going to do in terms of a crisis. So anything and everything we can do to try and get the word out and educate along with our tenants, we'd love that.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning the mobile phone one, because that's one thing that I mention quite a lot when I'm talking to tenants, because they don't understand how much, in my words, I think it's a bit of a rip-off, because I know that I don't take it out, I have it on my contents insurance. Yeah. But I just want to say, along with the cost of living, which I know that we're going to be doing an awful lot with our council tenants, and I know Councillor Wood will probably speak on that in a moment, that this is a really, really positive way that we can actually help people tackle that inequality, and something that we have always championed really, really strongly. And I think we also need to work a little bit closer with our police as well, because I think we could do more when there is the ASB and everything else about mentioning that, and that's something that I'll be bringing up through my locality working in the lags. But thank you, Rachel, anyway.
Just one second.
Thank you for all the hard work you do on this, Rachel. Just quick question, is the Tenants Hardship Fund being made available to clients who hit problems such as losing their employment or health issues after taking out the policy? Could we also look in the future at this in respect of leaseholders also? Thank you.
Leaseholders, this only covers tenants. Leaseholders have a separate insurance that they manage. So this scheme is just for council tenants, not for leaseholders. Aviva, who is the current insurer, so whoever we go out to tender will have their own arrangements, I'm sure, but if a tenant gets in rent arrears, there is a point in which we do cancel their insurance, yes. However, we will work, as we do with customers who get into hardship, to support them, and we do have our hardship fund that sits alongside that, so anybody that is impacted through loss of employment or any other financial hardship that they get that's beyond their control, we can use our hardship to prevent them getting into rent arrears, which would prevent the cancellation of their insurance. Yeah.
Thank you.
Answer your question.
Thank you, Rachel. One or two people have mentioned it, Councillor Dunn definitely mentioned it in relation to local area committees, and I think this may well be something that it would be worth you having a conversation at the LAC Chairs meeting with the LAC Chairs, so that we can look to promote around the city more widely. If there are no further questions or comments, we have 3 recommendations on page 108. Are we all happy to approve those, please? Yeah. Thank you, Rachel. A really good piece of work. Good to see you this afternoon. Thank you for coming along.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you both for coming along to the meeting this afternoon. This is for item 12 on the agenda, which is holiday activities and food, which can be found at page 129 on the agenda. Ladies, could you introduce yourselves and then give us the report, please? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Jess Wilson. I work in the public health team at Sheffield City Council.
Hi, I'm Emma Dickinson and I'm part of commissioning in the people portfolio.
I thought I pressed it, sorry. I'll give a brief overview and then I'll hand over to Emma to just give a little bit more detail. So the decision relates to the continuation of the National Department for Education funded holiday activities and food programme. The HAF programme is now nationally being confirmed for a further 3 years. We receive as a local authority the grant determination on an annual basis, and the value of that is approximately 2.7 million per year. The HAF, for those who aren't familiar with it, it is a programme that provides holiday clubs with enriching activities and food for children who are eligible for means-tested free school meals during certain school holidays. We have about 26,000 eligible children living within the Sheffield borders, And just to note that historically, when Sheffield first had a half pilot in 2020, that was during COVID restrictions. So the delivery of that pilot was remote activities and food parcels for eligible families. Throughout 2021 and on an ongoing basis, we've transitioned that to face-to-face holiday club activities with food as part of those activities. So we're no longer doing food parcels as part of half. Our model locally is to fund local providers, mainly in the voluntary sector, to deliver these holiday clubs during the school holidays. We know that the activities and the food are a lifeline for families at what is a very challenging time financially for many, but we also understand that there are wider benefits to our Sheffield approach, in particular investment and capacity building in our voluntary sector partners, keeping as much as possible of the half investment within our local economy and providing opportunities for local training and employment, particularly building the play work and youth work infrastructure in Sheffield. 2021 was the first full year of the national half rollout, and in summer alone we reached around 11,000 of our eligible free school meal children, and we worked with over 130 delivery organisations last year.
I'm just going to touch on the model for everybody, just to understand a little bit more. So as Jess has outlined the high-level approach, we're working with the DFE model, which is 6 weeks of the calendar year. That's 1 week at Easter, 4 weeks in the summer, and 1 week in the winter holidays. The model's described as 4x4 by DFE, and that means 4 days a week, 4 hours of the day. But I think it's really important, and what we were very keen to do here in Sheffield is recognise that children, young people, families are all very different. We're all very different. We're all interested in many different things. Some children will go to a whole day session. Some children will go to a 2-hour session. So I think we felt it was very important to have a very vast and varied provider and delivery organisation so that we could provide many different things that range from physical activities to theatre going, to picnics in the park, to going out to the peak, to growing, to cookery type things. So many different things, 130 organisations, as Jess said, skateboarding, all sorts of things. And I think we felt that that was incredibly important to give such a very varied approach and lots of opportunities for children to try many different things that they might not often have the opportunity to do so. And also, in doing that, it has meant that the monies has stayed within Sheffield and very much built our provider organisations in Sheffield. Key to the DFE requirements was an offer for every child and young person in the city if they wanted to go to something, and we felt very much that we did have an offer for every child last year. Every family received a letter and a really lovely booklet through the post in early July, and we will be looking to replicate that again this year, because although we are working with many different organisations who have absolute reach into communities that we don't necessarily do, we didn't want to just rely on that, so there was something going through the door of every family, ensuring that that letter was available. Alongside, just to give an example, we worked with schools, and we continue to work with schools, and some schools delivered directly. We also worked alongside some of our citywide organisations, so Places for People and City Trust offered swimming and ice skating throughout the year. We had a good number of children going to the Panto just before Christmas, which was a really lovely opportunity. We're also working alongside VAS to develop that workforce, as Jess has touched on, to ensure that actually everybody, we can utilise this and have a real legacy of really well-trained staff within the city, within lots of many different organisations, ensuring they're at the best opportunities to apply for other monies and attract in. Some key developments and learnings that we want to build on, just to finish the report, is we want to engage more schools. We really did push to talk to schools last year, but it was a very difficult year for schools in terms of COVID delivery, and we know that there will be more schools who will want to deliver this year. We're wanting to improve on the data collection that we have done this year to really get a booking system that gives us a richer sense of data, build on that food offer, and actually we've been working with a number of organisations to support in developing capacity around the food offer and just really engaging with more older young people. So that was a whistle-stop tour, canter through the report.
That's it. Yeah, and thank you both. I think it's really important to say that, you know, our children and young people across the city, you know, as across the country, have suffered greatly because of COVID. You know, this has put them way back in terms of their development and well-being and mental health. And so it's really heartwarming to sit here and listen to the lengths that we are going to as a council to provide a wide range of activities, so that whatever a child or a young person may be interested in, there's the opportunity there for them to get involved and to get back out and about and having some normality basically in their lives. So I think from all of us here, it is a big thank you for all of the work, you know, that you have done. It is really fantastic, and it's really good news that it's continuing. I'm going to hand over to Councillor Dunn because I know she's been a great champion of this, and you've done a great job on this too, Jane, as well. Thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you both for all your hard work. And I think the fact that we were almost at the pilot as the pandemic hit has put us in really good stead as our families are going to face the biggest crisis that I think most families are going to face as the cost of living hits really hard as we go through the summer. The one thing you didn't actually mention, which I think you do, is by the percentage increase that you've actually handled within the department. It was a 92% increase. That is how much the families and the young children needed the support of the council over the last 12 months. And I think I want to thank you for that, because, I mean, it was absolutely unprecedented. And I think the way that you've worked with the voluntary organisations to make sure that you're working with these free school meal vouchers as well, that we're using that information, we're making sure that we're not duplicating across the city, so we've got our reach even further. And with the locality working that Councillor Grocott mentioned earlier, it's another way that we can make sure that we get that reach even further. But I think it isn't just about the food and being healthy, and we all know that that's quite important to me. It's the actual having fun and expanding and which I think our young people have missed out so much on. And I love the fact that you said going to the pantomime, do you know, because it is things that some people have just, that those kind of activities will become things that some of our young children will not have the ability to experience, and that breaks my heart. So the fact that that's part of this programme is absolutely, it's at the heart of what Sheffield's about. But thank you so much, and I look forward to working with you for the next few months and further on afterwards.
Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you for the report, and again, I welcome the initiative. Incidentally, I was a volunteer in the pilots in my community, so I could see how hard people were working and how well they were working together and the effort that went in. This isn't actually about numbers, but I'm going to ask some questions about numbers. I just would like some idea about, I mean, I know that there's, it's a disgrace, isn't there, 26,000 children that are eligible for free school meals. It's a complete and total disgrace. But I was just wondering what good would look like in the number of children, or families rather, that either, that we could manage to engage in this process, and it might have to build rather than you know, be fully up and running to start with, because I know these things are about relationships and are about people finding out about what's going on. But I just really like to get a sense, first of all, of you know, what the scale of the families we're trying to reach. And then the second bit is, you've mentioned stuff around electronic booking and so on to try and get identify families so that we can follow them up. But again, I'm sort of really concerned that it's appropriately targeted at a local level as well. That's what really, inspires me that we reach children in the community for which I'm responsible. So those are my two questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shai, a bit. I think they're interlinked, those questions as well. So firstly, on the potential for this is the first year nationally it's been rolled out. And the beginning of the year was impacted by COVID, so we're still not fully sure. We've been benchmarking ourselves. We reached about 40% of our eligible children. Benchmarking against other local authorities is really variable. Some reached a higher proportion than that. Many reached as low as 5% of their children. So I think we're well above the average in terms of the proportion of our children that we managed to reach. In terms of where we could go, I mean, ultimately we have to have an offer for every eligible children, and I would like us to aspire over 3 years to get as close as possible as we can to the 90% and above. But we have to balance that against the amount of funding that we've got available, and it's going to be a constant balancing act over the next few years around some of the more exciting things we might want to offer, like overnight trips and pantomime, which actually cost a lot more money. So the more children we engage, we have to balance that against what the offer is and keeping it exciting. So I think it's going to be a bit of a learning process in terms of how far we can go with it. In terms of booking system, I think again that's a balancing act between a system where the people can book on that ensures that we're reaching the neediest people and gives us the data that we want on who's accessing it and where, but nothing that's so that creates a barrier to access, because it is really important that those community groups that are actually out there can encourage people onto the programme as well, and that having a system or a number, a unique identifying number, doesn't become a barrier to them doing that. So I don't know if that fully answers your question. It's something that we're very mindful of.
Just to add to Jess almost, I think you're absolutely right, and I think that's the heart of some of our model, to be honest, was very much around working with organisations that are absolutely rooted in neighbourhoods because they're already working with families. So I think we're balancing that fact that actually there is our partners out there very much working with families that are known to them, but how do we also reach those families who don't know about organisations as well? So I think the heart of our model is very much working with those really place-based, quite often small organisations who have the absolute reach, who it doesn't matter what the logo is or whatever, that they're the trusted relationships. I think the other thing that happened a little bit this year but didn't happen as well as we would have liked is the conversations in school in the run up to the school holidays, and I think that's what we'll be looking to do more of this coming year. Fingers crossed nothing happens or changes, but I think it's very much how do we work in tandem with schools, with those those individuals in schools who really know those families that are most in need, who can have trusted conversations and say, have you seen, shall we book you on? And particularly, you didn't necessarily ask the question, but I think it was in there around digital exclusion as well, so that actually maybe that they can book people onto the system and they're already on there. Some of our provision we know very much works in very very hard, excluded communities or communities that are far away. So some of their provision wasn't publicly available, so that it was very much targeted at communities that they work with. A really good example of one of our organisations, she had a session in the park for mums, pre the summer, and said, come down, I'll tell you about it and I'll sign you up there and then. So I think there are many different options in there in different places that suit our local neighbourhoods and our organisations, to be honest.
Thank you for the response, and thanks for all the work that's gone into it. And just to let you know that anything I can do as a local councillor to make this a success, you can count on me. Thank you.
Councillor Teal.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Jess and Emma, for the fantastic work that you've managed to do. And I just want to make a comment on timescales, because I know the initial funding was quite sudden, and what you managed to do to roll out the provision that you did was absolutely tremendous, alongside partners, of course, and voluntary service organisations, was real testimony to incredible hard work that you put in. And so I'd like to think that as a result of that success, that's what's led to this funding. You got more time much more time now to plan the provision, and some of the activities that you've suggested, Emma, sound really exciting, and it's because of that hard work that now we've got better time to plan. And also how sad it is that we've got to do this in the first place, but how fantastic it is that we have this resource and officers like yourselves that are really doing an excellent job in rolling out this provision. So well done. Yeah, thank you.
Any more comments or questions? Councillor Turpin.
Thank you. Just a short comment, and I nearly didn't speak because everybody has already kind of said the things, but just again, thanks so much. And we don't often get a project that meets so many needs, and it's for something that could just be like, oh, here, have some food. It's meeting so many more needs than that, and the mental health and well-being of those children being engaged by people during the holidays, and also, those local voluntary community sector organisations that are the local experts and that are also helping them build their connections in the communities and joining them together with school. There's just so many positives, and I just think it's really good, and so I just wanted to say thanks and well done.
Thank you, everyone. We do have 4 recommendations on page 130, the first line of which is amended and now should read, it is recommended that the co-op executive, and then take points 1 to 4. Are we all happy to agree those 4 recommendations, please? Yes? Thank you. Thank you both very much. A great piece of work, and keep doing what you're doing so well. Thank you for coming in today. Good afternoon, Phil. You're here for item 13, which is the month 9 capital approvals. If you could introduce yourself, please, and then give us your report, that would be great. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm Phil Moorcroft. I lead the capital team, and I'm here to present the monthly changes to the capital programme to obtain your approval for required changes to budgets, procurement strategies, acceptance of grants, and also delegations to award contracts. This month we've got 9 additions to the programme, which add almost 5 million to the value of the capital programme. I don't propose to go into detail on every single scheme, but I would like to highlight for your benefit and members of the public some key projects that I think would be of interest. First of all, we've secured almost £370,000 of levelling up funding to progress the feasibility works at Castlegate and at Attercliffe, following the formal offer of funding from central government. We are now kick-starting the feasibility works to progress the new community hub works in Stocksbridge. We're delivering almost £250,000 of sustained investment in our public rights of way network across the city. We're investing in walking and cycling routes in Outibridge as part of our ongoing drive to promote active travel. We're investing £100,000 of our own resources across the city to address the issues of fly tipping and graffiti which blight our communities. We've successfully secured almost £900,000 of grant funding to deliver significant upgrades to facilities at Aldine House, our secure children's home. And finally, following reversion of the John Lewis building to the council, we need to undertake some works urgently to make the building safe and ready for the next stage of its development, whatever that may be. Consultation is ongoing, but there are very significant amounts of asbestos-containing materials in that building, and those need removing quickly, whatever the future use of the store. We've also got a grant to accept of just over £67,000 of active travel funding from the Merrill Combined Authority to support an existing active travel neighbourhood scheme, well, 2 schemes at Nether Edge and Crooks, and they're already underway. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Some exciting schemes going on there. It would be remiss of me and my colleagues would be disappointed if I didn't say I'm really pleased to see Soxbridge on the list. So we'll just leave it at that. Has anyone got any questions or comments, please, for Phil? Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Phil. Always good news in these, and the thing that I wanted to draw out this afternoon was actually how successful we have been as a council in terms of attracting external resources to be able to deliver these fantastic projects. So thank you for you and your team. You're the sort of, you help to sort of pull it all together and ensure that we get it all delivered and so on. So thank you for all of that, and thank you for bringing us some good news. We don't always get good news about the budget. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any more questions or comments? Happy days. We have got 2 recommendations on page 146. Are we happy to approve those, please? Yeah. Your work is done, Phil. Thank you. Good to see you. Quickest of the day. We should have kept you longer with the good news. Paul, good afternoon. I understand that you are probably the happiest person in the room. I understand that you're working up to retirement. So please make the most of this opportunity to regale us with your wealth of experience and knowledge before you take your well-earned retirement. And thank you for coming this afternoon. It's item 14, which is the Revenue Budget and Capital Programme Monitoring. Thank you.
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Chair, for those nice words. And I'd just like to say it's been a great privilege to serve you and the people of Sheffield over the last 15 years. I have to say, I wish I could leave on a happier financial note, but that's not going to be possible. The purpose of the report is to update members on the Council's financial position as at month 8, which was the end of November. And the importance of that is it sets the context for the next item on the agenda, which is the 22-3 budget. The headline overspend which we're facing in 21-22 is an overspend of 33.4 million. That's gone down by about 3.9 million from the last report, which was at month 6, but that is largely due to one-off items, which will not reoccur in the future. So the important there, I think, for members to note is that that means that there is an underlying overspend in the base budget of somewhere around 35 to 40 million. And that, in the longer term, is unsustainable as it rolls forward into future years, into the future years business planning. The focus of the report is very much on the general fund, but members should note that there are overspends in areas such as the housing revenue account and in dedicated schools grant, DSG, which is 3.4 million over, and the detail of that is in the main report. On a more positive note, the collection fund is actually in a much stronger position than what we budgeted for. The assumptions that we put into the budget were pessimistic based on the latest economic indicators this time last year when we were in the height of the uncertainty over the pandemic. Fortunately, so far, those forecasts have not yet come to pass, and therefore our collection performance is much stronger than what we expected, and we're ahead of budget on the collection fund. Appendix 2 seeks approval to clear some old debt that's accumulated over a period going back actually 12 years. So that means a large proportion of it is just unenforceable legally. And we're seeking members' approval to do that. The report details the reasons why we are in the position we are and the action that we're taking to make sure we don't go there again. Finally, the capital programme on Appendix 3 shows that we've got significant slippage, mainly due to the impact of the pandemic, the restart of economies, creating shortages of material, and also the inflation that's been incurred within the construction industry. Members, through the previous item on capital approvals, will have reset many of those budgets, which will mean that the budget will reduce in forthcoming months and the underspend should be much less. That's all I wish to say on the report, but I'm very happy to take additional questions from members. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Paul. Any questions, please? You're obviously being far too thorough. Any comments? Councillor MacDonald.
Two comments, thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report, Paul. I know how much work goes into this. I just wanted to reassure everybody how much work's actually going on behind the scenes to tackle this deficit, because it's really scary. The numbers are scary, and we have to take it really seriously, but we are taking it seriously. So both of my colleagues here are certainly going to involved in work within the people portfolio, transformation projects and so on, to try and reduce the overspend as much as possible, and in particular the trajectory into to next year. So that's my first comment. And the second is thank you very much, Paul, for all your contributions and so on, and we'll miss you. Good luck in the future.
Thank you very much. And that, I think, is an important point, that this is not a hopeless position that we find ourselves in. With the work that's been undertaken, we can get that structural realignment of the budget that we need. You know, I wish everybody every endeavour in the future. Thank you.
Councillor Johnson?
So I've just got one small question that I wanted to ask, but thanks for your work on this, Paul, for all the last 15 years. But just a big question about this, the 44 million on the business rates. Looks like a big scary figure. We've explained in here that the council will receive grant funding to compensate for the deficit being half of that, isn't it? I was just going to ask if you can tell us when that grant funding from the central government comes in, and whether it makes a difference overall.
No, good point. The collection fund accounting is very technical indeed in terms of the way it works. The key point, I think, is in sections, in paragraphs 3, 4 and 5. It doesn't have any impact on the revenue budget at all. Eventually, the payments we get from government do catch up with it, and it evens itself out on the business rate side. The key point is that on the council tax, we're well in control of where we need to be, And that's the one that we would rightly be concerned if that was going out of kilter.
I see. Thanks very much.
If there are no more questions, we have 4 recommendations on pages 175 and 176. Are we all happy to approve those, please? Yes? Thank you, Paul, and very best wishes for a healthy, happy, very long retirement. Much deserved. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Thank you for coming. Eugene's just been saying that the report is so massive it takes 4 of you to carry it in. So, hopefully it doesn't take that long to whiz us all through it all. Obviously, all joking aside, it's the budget report for the new financial year. It's a very important report. Thank you for your time this afternoon to explain it. If you want to whiz down the line and Kate, do you want to say something?
That's fine, Chair. You can do the introductions first, but I just wanted to raise the issue about the report from Overview and Scrutiny Management Committee. Whenever you want to take that, that's fine with me. Okay. Well, just to say that we did attend Overview and Scrutiny Management Committee last week, and that we've got a copy of the resolutions of that committee in front of us today. So I just wanted to set the context before we actually started on the item. The Overview and Scrutiny have noted the contents of the report, thanked officers as appropriately, particularly placed on record thanks to Dave, who's another one that we're going to be losing soon, and recommending that it be approved by the Co-op Exec without amendment. That was the point, actually, that they haven't made any amendments that they want us to consider. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I think that's an important point in relation to it having gone through scrutiny before it's coming here. So welcome, gentlemen. If you want to start with Ryan and go down and introduce yourselves, please, and then give us the report. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. My name is Ryan Keyworth. I'm the Council's Director of Finance and Commercial Services.
Phil Moorcroft, Senior Capital and Construction Category Manager.
David Phillips, Head of Strategic Finance. And Tim Hardy, Head of Commercial Business Development.
Thanks again, Chair. If I can make a request that we look at the revenue budget first and perhaps take questions on that, and then we move on to the capital programme if that works for members.
If that works for you, that works for us.
So, as Councillor MacDonald said, we had a run through this report at Overview and Scrutiny Management Committee last week, where we were able to, with Councillor MacDonald, answer the questions that members had. The report in front of you, the revenue budget report, is based on the medium-term financial analysis that was approved at Co-operative Executive in October last year. And I think it's fairly safe to say that this is the most challenging budget process that the Council has had to deal with, certainly in recent years, if not ever. You've just heard from Paul Schofield in respect to the latest monitoring position. We hope that position will improve slightly by the end of the year to an overspend of around £30 million, although that improvement is likely to be for one-off rather than ongoing reasons, although there is an enormous amount of work going on, particularly in the 2 social care services, to try and improve the position long-term.
The MTFA reported a gap initially of almost £100 million. And at that time, that gap existed for three main reasons. We have about £20 million of COVID grant, government grant, that comes to an end. It was one-off in nature, and it's not being repeated. As Paul described, the underlying position for 21-22 is somewhere between 35 and 40 million pounds. That rolls forward. That's part of the £100 million initial gap. And we have about another £40 million of pressures moving from this year into next year for normal things like inflation, other cost pressures and demand growth in some of our services. To address that, we have identified £52.7 million of savings that are set out in some considerable detail in the various parts of the report. We've also calculated that about £18 million of costs will come to a fairly natural end as the pandemic ends. That includes lower subsidies to Sheffield City Trust, because obviously the facilities are now mostly open again, and a recovery of things like fees and charges, all the way from planning income through to car parking, for example. So we've seen a recovery. The government spending review from last year gave us about a net £13 million benefit as well, above the assumptions that we'd made, fairly prudent assumptions albeit. That's resulted in a gap of £14.5 million, which we will need to fill from reserves, as the report sets out. The report also proposes a council tax increase of 2.99%. That's the highest that we're able to apply without recourse to a referendum. That's based on an ultimate collection rate of about 99% and an in-year collection rate of 95.5%. That's a return to pre-pandemic levels of collection. It's consistent with what you've seen from Paul just now in terms of the collection fund budget monitoring being in a better place than we expected it to be. So just in terms of reserves, the council has around £260 million of reserves, and there are three fundamental categories of reserves. There's money that we hold that really isn't ours, PFI credits as an example. We get money from government that needs passing on to contractors. We hold some reserves for timing reasons to smooth out expenditure which might be lumpy in a way that makes sense for us to do so. The major sporting facilities debt is a good example of that. The repayments that are due are not smooth, and for practical reasons we don't want the budget to fluctuate up and down, so we smooth it out using a reserve that should balance by the time we finish that debt. About 150 of the £260 million though are held against risks of one type or another. And that's where we've been looking really hard to examine the reserves that we can release for use to support the revenue budget position. And we've determined that about 70 million, so just a touch under half of those reserves are available for use, particularly a reserve we've held against the risk of increased future pension costs. So a few years ago, the South Yorkshire Pension Scheme was in deficit. That's now no longer the case. So the reserve that we'd set aside to deal with the risk of increasing future pension costs is not needed in any way the way that it used to be. So that gives us a significant amount of support that we can put into the revenue budget. At the risk of stating the obvious, though, these reserves, once they are used, are gone. They are not recurrent. They are one-off in nature. They're like a savings account. So we're going to need to use about 30 million of that 70 million to balance this year's revenue budget. The overspend that we ultimately end up with needs dealing with through reserves. We're using 14.5 million to balance next year's budget as part of this report. So that takes us to 45 in round numbers. So that gives us about 25 million left. And we're going to use that, or we're proposing in this report to use that against the timing and delivery risks. So the time it might take us to deliver some of the savings and the difficulty of delivering 52.7 million of savings as part of next year's budget. So we've got almost half of the required savings backed by reserves, but they are one-off. That means it's critically important that we deliver all of the savings that we set out to do in the year, and clearly by this point next year. So it is critical that we stay within our budget, and the report makes some specific mention of that. And it's true as a council that we all need to work together to deliver all the savings that we've all agreed to deliver. There's a specific recommendation in there, recommendation D, which if I can, is to note that if overspends against the agreed budgets emerge, then executive directors and directors are required to develop and implement plans to fully mitigate any overspend within 22-23, so within the year, in consultation with elected members, cognizant obviously that we're moving from the current cooperative executive model to a committee system during the next financial year. Now, achieving these savings across the council is far from a straightforward task. In the corporate services resources and such like, you've got services like IT, finance, HR, legal, communications. All of those services are seeing capacity reduced, so essentially a cash cut to the budget. Within social care, what we've been able to do is to hold the budget at, broadly speaking, the level of expenditure we are seeing this year. So that's an increase from last year's budget to this year's budget of about £29 million. That still means that those services have got to effectively live within a cash standstill position from the end of this year through to the end of next year. That is one heck of an ask. That is not to be understated. And I think if memory serves, there's about £37 million worth of savings in the people portfolio that are required to achieve that, so by no means a small task. That does involve things like reviewing high-cost placements, trying to work out how we can reset home care back to something more like the pre-pandemic infrastructure that we had, building our own capacity, for example, in children's social care to address some market failure, which is causing some of our care placements to be extremely expensive because the market simply can't handle it. And there's a raft of other changes that are set out in some detail in the report. So, and in our place portfolio, we are essentially holding that portfolio at cash standstill. So that involves changes to fees and charges, the sort of things you've seen today, reviews of our accommodation as an organisation, and early work to really get to make some significant changes to our leisure and entertainment offering, actually in line with the strategy that came to Cooperative Executive, I think it was November last year. What we have managed to do, despite all of this, is to protect as much of the investment in social care that we've been able to. So we've continued to protect that key investment. The budget, as I said, incorporates the overspends from 21-22 in it, and that continues a pattern of significant investments from budget to budget in our social care services that stretch back at least the last 10 years and well beyond. Using the reserves to balance, though, means we are going to need to try and do more than deliver the budget savings that we have. If we're unable to do that, we're going to find ourselves in a very difficult position at this point next year, because we'll have used most of the reserves that we can make available, and we will have a significant budget gap to address, so there'll be far less choice on the table. So we're planning a series of strategic reviews, and the budget report talks at very high level about some of the early thinking on those reviews. The intention here is to alter the way we work and deliver some of these services. The perfect answer is to deliver the same or better services for less money. If we can deliver better for less, that's ideal. And we're going to do that by looking at the way we work, by joining some services up that currently are delivered separately across the organisation in different ways, and to really try and examine how we can maximise the pounds that we spend on these services. We'll keep this list under review, and these will be discussed with members in the normal way we discuss initiatives and actions during the year. But this is very much about not waiting to come before you next year at this time to talk about some more changes and more budget savings. It's a continuous process. The financial position means that we have to be. So we'll be looking at our office accommodation, the buildings that we have in and around the city. We'll be looking at our early intervention and prevention services. That will include the financial support we provide for hardship, and you've had other reports on this agenda which touched on some of that as well. We'll be looking at libraries, particularly libraries in communities, to the extent that it might be possible to run some more of them through a volunteer-led approach, as we do with some libraries in the city, fully acknowledging that it won't work everywhere, but there's an opportunity for us to look at that. We'll be looking at how we deliver customer services, and we'll be looking at how we can make better use of apprentices in our workplace. So an advantage there in bringing younger people into the workforce and giving them a good start on their careers. So, to be absolutely clear to members, those strategic reviews are a key part of our response to the fact that we're using almost £15 million of reserves to balance this budget. So we are recommending a budget that is legal. but it does use reserves in order to achieve that position, and I think it's important that I set that out very clearly to you this afternoon. That's all I wanted to say, Chair. Obviously, myself and colleagues very happy to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Ryan. I don't think any of us can underestimate the amount of work that has gone into this. You know, it's been difficult over a number of years, but I think it's really been compounded this year. It's come home to a lot of us the difficulties that the council faces in relation to where we are. I think you ought to be commended for the vision and the foresight you're having in terms of looking at how we get around the challenges that we are facing. And I know that the whole team have put an awful lot of work in. And in that, I do include you, Kate, as well. Councillor MacDonald, you've done a fantastic job. It's been difficult. None of us, you know, we don't become councillors to make cuts to services. We don't become we don't become public servants to make cuts to councillors. You know, we all understand that this is extremely difficult, but equally we are responsible and we need to make sure that we give our city the best services it possibly can in the situation that, frankly, from my perspective, has been forced upon us over a number of years now. So I do thank you all very much for the work that you've done on this. And as Ryan said, has anyone got any questions they would like to ask, please? I've got Councillor Linders-Hammond, then Councillor Dunn. Thank you.
I might have a comment in a moment, Chair, if you want to do that, but just a question which I think, and obviously thank you for all your really hard work, which, I mean, particularly in context of the cost of living crisis, I wonder if there's anything more you can say around recommendation P, which mentions about the energy support payments, and how, you know, whether there's more, you know, you can say about the, to reassure the public about making sure that those payments will, you know, the council will work to make sure that those payments have the impact they're intended to, and also anything about the kind of impact on the council that we know about from our role in that scheme. Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Linders-Hammond, which recommendation specifically? P.
So forget the recommendations. The energy support payments is the issue. Forget the recommendations for ease. Let's just talk anything you can say about that would be, you know, appreciated. Thank you.
So the energy support payments, the very recently announced government scheme. Right now, thank you. Apologies. Yes, we are absolutely engaging in that process. I don't know if Tim, do you want to add anything to that, because we were discussing it just yesterday.
Yeah, certainly. So, yeah, as Ryan says, it's quite a recently announced scheme that we're actually still awaiting. Well, unless it's happened while I've been sitting waiting to join this meeting, we're still actually waiting for full government guidance on how this scheme actually is going to be administered. The local authority's main role is actually in relation to making payments in relation to council tax. A council tax rebate is basically termed of £150 per household in the city, basically, if they're in bands A to D. So still quite early days working it through, working quite closely with our system providers, basically, to try and understand how we can basically smooth that process and deliver it as quickly as possible. But it's still a very emerging, evolving picture at the moment, I think it's fair to say.
Thank you, and thank you all. I've got to know you all really, really well. I want to thank you and Councillor MacDonald for all your support in my portfolio that I've children, families. I mean, I think it's probably the most emotive area to actually have to look at, and I just want to it's a comment more than a question, but it's about how all the different areas that we have to work with, like education and with health, and that how hard you've worked with all these other organisations in order to be able to put this review in place, because it isn't just about what the council will be doing, it's working across all these other organisations. And I know from how they've spoken how the amount of respect they have for you all, and actually how by working together is the only way that we're going to achieve anything. So I just wanted to clarify that, because you've marked it in the papers here that there is a rising statutory demand for services in my area, like special educational needs, but the money doesn't stack up at all. And I think it's when we're working together with education, with health, that it doesn't make it easier, but it means we're all coming together when we're actually challenging government over that. But we're not backing away, because we can't back away. As Councillor Grocott said, we have to deliver this budget. But, you know, it's quite obvious that the money doesn't meet the statutory obligation. And so anyway, it was really a thank you. Well, the most challenging, I think, 9 months of my life in an area that is absolutely massive, but I have never worked closer or understood my budget better, ever. So I want to thank you from that.
Thank you on behalf of the team.
Any more questions or comments? Councillor Linders-Hammond, then Councillor MacDonald.
I just, sorry, I maybe could have made a comment earlier, but I just really wanted to just say that I properly say thank you to all your officers and to Councillor MacDonald, because what I know is that the thing to say about social care is that social care cannot be separated from the rest of budgets of the council, because as long as, if social care is not sustainable, we can't do anything else as a council that we would want to do. And I appreciate that, you know, it is a headache getting social care right and tackling the long-standing challenges there. I think that, you know, what I would say is that collaboration and work between finance officers, a bit like what Councillor Dunn said, and adult social care officers, is at a level that it's never been before. I'd like to personally thank Ryan for your role that you're, you know, starting in terms of at the heart of our adult social care governance and the finance side of that, because I think that collaboration is absolutely essential for achieving what's in here and making sure that not only the budgets are delivered, but also that strategic review is as successful as it can be. I just, you know, because there is not a dichotomy between managing social care budgets effectively and delivering care, because those 1,000 citizens that rely on social care in the city need a council that can deliver that. Without that, there will be many, many people in trouble. And I just close in noting that this will be the 9th budget that I've been a councillor for, and it will also be the 9th budget which will be at a time the government has promised a long-term funding plan for social care. Despite the many different papers and things they've brought forward in those 9 years, there has not been a national plan for sustainably funding social care, no matter what some government ministers might tell you. We still need that plan. Councils will do differently each year depending on what happens, but ultimately it's a shared national challenge. We do our absolute best locally, and I'm so glad we've got great members and officers supporting us. But without that national plan and significant national conversation about how we fund these sort of services, we'll keep being here and it'll keep being a huge challenge for us as an organisation. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you, Chair. And I'd just like to thank, personally, I'd like to thank all the finance team for all the fantastic work that's gone on, not just sort of sitting in a huddle in your own offices, but actually working across the council with all the other directorates and coming up with new ways to do things as well. So thank you for that, because I've witnessed it even more closely than colleagues have. I'm not going to make the speech that I'm saving for the Budget Council, but I'd just like to make the point that there are a number of councils that are in quite a lot of financial difficulty at the moment and facing potential government intervention, and that's because partly due to chronic underfunding of local government and, as George has said, adult social care. However, there's also sort of characteristic about being able to face up to and take difficult decisions, and this council is actually doing that. So I want to reassure the public that it is a difficult situation, but we have been on top of this right from the start, because I think I was in post a month before you came to tell me about the direction of the social care budget. So that's all I want to say about the process, that we have owned up to and taken full responsibility for the tough decisions that we're going to have to make, and also to implement them as we implement the budget next year. So thanks to the officers, and in particular thanks to Dave, because this will be your last one, won't it? You won't miss this, actually. It's last but not least, I suppose. And thanks again.
Councillor Turpin.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, guys. You've done an amazing job in obviously very difficult circumstances. I just wanted to ask a quick question. Is Sheffield comparable to other authorities, or are we an outlier with our deficit? Thank you.
Every authority is different, and it arrives, authorities arrive in the financial position they find themselves in for a whole raft of different reasons. On the one hand, we're an outlier. We've got more available reserves to use to deal with the challenges that we're facing than many others would have. So, yeah, we're an outlier in that respect. Many authorities, most authorities that have social care services are facing pressures across children's and adults. We're facing significant pressures in both children's and adults, though. So what you find in many councils is that they'll be facing pressures in either children's or adults for one reason or another. We've got a combination of both here, which makes us a little bit unusual in that regard. So to a certain extent, the straight answer is yes, but on two different fronts for very different reasons.
Any more comments or questions? Are we all happy then to accept all of the recommendations that we have on pages 196 to 198, please? Yeah. That's good news, thank you. Dave, enjoy your retirement. We've certainly got our money's worth out of you for the last year, but we're going on to the next bit. I wasn't sure. Are you all for staying? Oh, right. Okay. Sorry. Carry on.
Thanks, Chair. I'm going to ask Tim Hardy to introduce the capital strategy, if I can.
I'll just say thank you very much. I've enjoyed all the last 35 years working in various bits of local government, and a large chunk of that here, either directly employed by the council or by external audit. So thank you all very much for all your time and support over the years.
No, thank you, Dave. And stay by your phone. You never know, you might be getting the odd phone call when you're retired.
Okay, if I can introduce the capital budget then to the Co-operative Executive. This report basically details the Council's capital strategy, setting the budget for next financial year, but also the 5-year budget as well through to 2027. Before it goes on to full council for formal approval. So for next financial year, we're setting a capital budget of £302.7 million, and over the 5-year period, that figure is £821 million. SIPFA requirements have actually changed since this report was taken last year, and it requires us to basically take a more strategic, longer-term look at our programme and our capital investment choices. So in addition to the 5-year capital programme, we now have a 10-year investment pipeline which sets out potential projects we should prioritise and seek funding for. So those schemes will not necessarily be funded projects, but they are things where the ideas are reasonably well developed and we would like to consider them in more detail, and that's part of the focus of the services portfolios and resources. We're also, though, looking at a 30-year horizon scale, which looks more at the city's direction of travel in specific key theme areas and what issues might be coming over the coming decade. So the capital strategy tries to capture all of that really in one document. In the, if you look at section A2, that sets out a number of different key facts and various policy positions that we're required to renew on an annual basis or review on an annual basis. Section A3 highlights some of our more key challenges, perhaps on a more immediate basis for strategic decisions we've got coming up in the future. These particular areas have been pulled out principally because they, to a certain extent, all impinge upon our own funding and our own resources to a greater or lesser extent. And so to actually work out an appropriate way to tackle some of these issues requires a more holistic look. So that's principally built around the delivery of the city centre strategy and our vision for some of our key landmark buildings, such as Graves Library, for example, the town hall that we're sitting in, things like that. Basically need a holistic look in terms of how that fits in within a wider city centre picture. And that links in with areas like housing growth, our educational estate, and in particular special educational needs, which Brian's mentioned in the context of the revenue budget. Some of these things, the capital programme is actually some of the solution to some of the revenue pressures highlighted in the revenue report you've just received. And that also involves looking at our wider corporate estate as well, really. So A3 basically highlights some key areas we'll be looking at next financial year to work out the order of priorities and that overall funding strategy. Section A4 in the report summarises our approach to sustainability and climate change, which obviously was a key consideration with any capital project and programme. We're obviously having close regard to the 10-point plan for climate action, which provides a framework for making some of those decisions. And we're also introducing now climate impact assessments on all of our capital decisions, so that they're considered during all the stages of a project being developed and worked through. Section B of the capital strategy basically breaks down that spend I've just mentioned into the different priority areas and different themes. So, in other words, you've got a section looking at, for example, the economic ambitions for the city, transport, new homes and housing growth and the like are all broken down. And again, looking at it through that window of what's in the budget, but also what's in that 10-year investment priority sort of window, and then that 30-year set of challenges, really. So that summarise those areas in particular detail. And then, just in terms of the more technical parts at the back of the strategy document, C1 sets out our broad policy for our corporate investment fund. So effectively, the money that's our own capital reserve effectively to deploy to either lever in match funding or specifically fund our own projects without recourse to grant funding. And then all approved schemes are set out in Appendix C2, which lists the full extent of the capital programme. So that's a quick introduction. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions? Clearly more straightforward too, hopefully. Any comments? Councillor MacDonald.
Just once again to thank you for all the work that's gone, and your team for all the work that's gone on into this. And I know we've had quite a lot of discussion about it as well, so I've welcomed that. Thank you.
There's just a couple of recommendations on the capital strategy. Are we happy to accept both of those? Thank you very much. It's now you're just staying, Tim, or is everybody, just so I'm right, is everybody else going and you're doing this one on your own, item 16? Thank you, gentlemen, and thank you again, Dave. Good to see you. All the very best. I'll wait till they've gone. Yeah. This brings us on to item 16, which is the procurement of business rates and document management IT systems. Can I just remind members, please, that the Part 2 report and appendix is not available to the press and public because it contains exempt information. So if members wish to discuss this in Part 2, then we will need to know so that we can leave that to the end of the meeting and stop the webcast. Thank you. Tim, you're on a roll. Carry on. Thank you.
Yeah, but back again. This is a much more operational item in relation to the Revenues and Benefits Service. So this report seeking approval for the procurement of two different IT systems for a period of 5 years with an option to extend for a further 2-year period from April 2022. Revenues and Benefits uses two core IT systems provided by a company called NEC Software Solutions. There's a product called iWorld, which we use for our business rates billing and collection, that operates servicing about 19,000 businesses within the city. And then we have another system called Information at Work, which is a document management system. This basically enables us to provide a paperless administration system which covers 250,000 council tax accounts and 50,000 housing benefit and or council tax support claims as well. So they're very key systems that support large volumes of casework and customer contact. These systems have been used with the council for a number of years. Originally this was under the contract we had with Capita under when Revenues Management was an outsourced service. The iWorld Information at Work systems were migrated back to the council as part of the end of that contract, and that migration actually only took place in last year, so in 2021, that the hosting arrangements of those systems were moved back into the local authority control. There was an inevitable amount of work required to actually then stabilise those and get everything working properly, and also to actually get our new systems administration team familiar with actually servicing those directly rather than having that dealt with by Capita essentially. Basically it's been quite a, I suppose, quite a period of change and stability needed to get to this point. So having got to that stage, we weren't particularly keen to change that system again and go out to procure something completely different. In many ways our strategic objectives are met better by having continuation of the same systems, which actually gives us that stability to focus on actually the operating model for revenues and benefit service in the round, and that service came in via a cheaper transfer in January of 2020. So been delayed by the pandemic. We want to look at that more closely, so really we need the same systems of work to apply while we're addressing those questions. So yes, that's basically the logical reason for why we're making the recommendation to procure the same systems with a new contract this time via Crown Commercial Services, which offer this on a framework purchasing arrangement, and that gives us 5 to 7 years to operate the service and maintain stability.
Thank you, Tim. Any questions? Any comments?
Chair, I have a comment on one of the appendices, so obviously if you want to draw the meeting to a close, I'll make it after that point. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Are we all happy to agree the recommendations, or does... Well, I'm just going to take the recommendations, then we can technically close the meeting down unless it affects your ability to do that, Councillor MacDonald. Can we all agree those recommendations then? And then I think actually we can close the meeting down and then just deal with the point that Councillor MacDonald wants to make. So thank you all for attending this afternoon, and good to see you all. Thank you. You're very